Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to the world of Twilight. Now, I know those of you were hoping for Fallout 4. Well, some of you, not really. Anyway, um, I have here the short second. Short. I always want to say brief because her name is Bree. Anyway, the short second life of Bree Tanner. Now, I forgot we had this, even though I've mentioned it a few times on the channel and other videos. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. I should be able to pick up Eclipse tomorrow, and we can start finally reading it. I'm going to try and finish this before I start that one. And let me know if you'd like to see any other books being read. And I will continue to put up videos of Fallout 4, but very sporadically whenever something interesting happens and while I'm playing the game, I think I will. Anyway, so let's get started. As always, we shall read the foreword or the introduction, what have you. The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner, an Eclipse novella. Don't judge me. I'm just gonna say, Asia, forgive me, I don't know how one would pronounce this name. Asya. Let me know down in the comments if you know. I almost said Munich. It's not even close to Munich. Muchnick and Megan Hibbett. I don't know who they are. Introduction. No two writers go about things in exactly the same way. Well, that's true. We are all inspired and motivated in different ways. We have our own reasons why some characters stay with us, while others disappear into a backlog of neglected files. I almost said flies. Personally, I've never figured out why some of my characters take on strong lives of their own, but I'm always happy when they do. Those characters who are the most... well, we got right back into that, didn't we? are the most effortless to write, and so their stories are usually the ones that get finished. Bree is one of those characters, and she's the chief reason why the story is now in your hands rather than lost in the maze of forgotten folders inside my computer. The other two reasons are named Diego and Fred. I started thinking about Bree while I was editing Eclipse. Editing, not writing. When I was writing the first draft of Eclipse, I had first-person perspective blinders on. Anything that Bella couldn't see or hear or feel, or taste, or touch was irrelevant. That story was her experience only. The next step in the editing process was to step away from Bella and see how the story flowed. My editor, Rebecca Davis, was a huge part of that process, and she had a lot of questions for me about the things Bella didn't know and how we could make the right parts of that story clearer. Because Bree is the only newborn Bella sees, Bree's was the perspective that I had first gravitated toward as I considered what was going on behind the scenes. I started thinking about living in the basement with the newborns and hunting traditional vampire style. I imagined the world as Bree understood it, and it was easy to do that. From the start, Bree was very clear as a character, and some of her friends also sprang to life effortlessly. This is the way it usually works for me. I try to write a short synopsis of what is happening in some other part of the story, and I end up jotting down dialogue. In this case, instead of a synopsis, I found myself writing a day in Bree's life. Writing Bree was the first time I'd stepped into the shoes of a narrator who was a real vampire, a hunter, a monster. I got to look through her red eyes at us humans. Suddenly we were pathetic and weak, easy prey, of no importance whatsoever except as a tasty snack. Well, to be fair, she'd done that before, but I guess the eyes were gold. And black. Well, we kind of sort of saw Laurent's motivations, and James, and Victoria even. Never mind, I guess I'm nitpicking. Let me know what you guys think. I felt what it was like to be alone while surrounded by enemies, always on guard, never sure of anything except that her life was always in danger. I got to submerge myself in a totally different breed of vampires, newborns. The newborn life was something I had never gotten to explore. Excuse me. Bella was never a newborn like Bree was a newborn. It was exciting and dark and ultimately tragic. The closer I got to the inevitable end, the more I wished I'd concluded Eclipse just slightly differently. I wonder how you will feel about Bree. She's such a small, seemingly trivial character in Eclipse. She lives only for 5 minutes of Bella's perspective. Do you ever find yourself thinking about other people just going on with their daily lives, and you might be walking past each other when all of a sudden, your eyes meet, and for a split second, you feel like almost there could be a connection, and then you get awkward and you look away and you just pass by each other and you never see each other again, and they live completely different lives, separate from you in every way, shape, and form. That's how I look at it. People out there I'll never get to meet. People out there I'll never get to meet. Living their lives that I know nothing about. I didn't mean to get all existential. Where was I? And yet her story is so important to an understanding of the novel. When you read the Eclipse scene in which Bella stares at Bree, assessing her as a possible future, honestly, that was the most likely future. Other than Bella dying. Let me know if you agree, if you disagree. I'd love to, what do you call it? Discuss, not debate or anything. Did you ever think about what has brought Bree to that point in time? As Bree glares back, did you wonder what Bella and the Cullens look like to her? Probably not, but even if you did, I'll bet you never guessed her secrets. I hope you end up caring about Bree as much as I do, though that's kind of a cruel wish. Coming from someone that said that they hope that their work inspires people to not become writers, it really isn't. But at least you will know the whole story, and that no perspective is ever really trivial. Enjoy, Stephanie. Okay, now there are no chapters, because it's a novella. I don't know why I pronounce it that way. But at least I'm not saying novella. I'm working on it. So I'm probably going to read for about 30 minutes, including this. And we'll just go from there. And once I'm done with this one, maybe I'll start Eclipse, or maybe I'll start Eclipse before I'm finished. We'll see. There's 178 pages in this, and it's all just one big chapter. The newspaper headline glared at me from a little metal vending machine. Seattle under siege, death toll rises again. I feel like that should be a movie title on sci-fi. I should make that movie. I've always wanted to make movies. I hadn't seen this one yet. Some paperboy must have just restocked the machine. Lucky for him, he was nowhere around now. Great. Riley was going to blow a gasket. I would make sure I wasn't within reach when he saw this paper. Let him rip somebody else's arm off. I stood in the shadow behind the corner of a shabby 3-story building, trying to be inconspicuous while I waited for someone to make a decision. Not wanting to meet anyone's eyes, I stared at the wall beside me instead. The ground floor of the building housed a record shop that had long since closed. Do you guys remember records? I don't. I'm not that old. The windows, lost to weather or street violence, were filled in with plywood. Ah, it's starting to look like Fallout. Hee hee hee. Over the top. Ha! I love being over the top. Were apartments empty, I guess, since the normal sounds of sleeping humans were absent? I wasn't surprised. The place looked like it would collapse in a stiff wind. There we go. The buildings on the other side of the dark, narrow street were just as wrecked. The normal scene for a night out on the town. I didn't want to speak up and draw attention, but I wish somebody would decide something. I was really thirsty, and I didn't care much whether we went right or left or over the roof. I just wanted to find some unlucky people who wouldn't even have enough time to think, wrong place, wrong time. Unfortunately, tonight Riley sent me out with two of the most useless vampires in existence. Riley never seemed to care who he sent out in hunting groups, or particularly bugged when sending out the wrong people together meant fewer people coming home. Tonight I was stuck with Kevin and some blonde kid whose name I didn't know. They both belonged to Raoul's gang. So it went without saying that they were stupid and dangerous, but right now, mostly stupid. It can't go without saying if we haven't met them first. Again, I'm nitpicking. Instead of picking a direction for our hunt, suddenly they were in the middle of an argument over whose favorite superhero would be a better hunter. The nameless one was demonstrating his case for Spider-Man now, skittering up the brick wall of the alley while humming the cartoon theme song. That would so be me. I sighed in frustration. Were we ever going to hunt? A little flicker of movement to my left caught my eye. It was the other one Riley had sent out in this hunting group, Diego. I didn't know much about him, just that he was older than most of the others. Riley's right-hand man was the word. That's not a word. That didn't make me like him any more than the other morons. Diego was looking at me. He must have heard the sigh. I looked away. Keep your head down and your mouth shut. That was the way to stay alive in Riley's crowd. Spider-Man is such a whiny loser, Kevin called up to the blonde kid. I'll show you how a real superhero hunts. He grinned wide. His teeth flashed in the glare of a street light. Kevin jumped into the middle of the street just as the lights from a car swung around to illuminate the cracked pavement with a blue-white gleam. He flexed his arms back, then pulled them slowly together like a pro wrestler showing off. Doesn't that sound like Michael? Those of you who have been here long enough to have heard me talk about my friend. The car came on, probably expecting him to get the beep out of the way like a normal person would, like he should. Oh, jeez. Hulk mad, Kevin bellowed. Hulk smash! I'm not good at the Hulk. I'll work on it. He leapt forward, or do you say leaped? To meet the car before it could brake, grabbed its front bumper and flipped it over his head so that it struck the pavement upside down with a squeal of bending metal and shattering glass. Inside, a woman started screaming. Oh man, Diego said, shaking his head. He was pretty... What? Oh, he was pretty, with dark, dense, curly hair. Oh, okay, gotcha. Big, wide eyes and really full lips, but then who wasn't pretty? Even Kevin and the rest of Raoul's morons were pretty. You know what? I'm going to write a vampire story, and I'm going to make all of the vampires hideously ugly, but they're going to have wonderful personalities, and they're going to be nice, and they're going to work for their happy endings, and they're going to be good characters. And I don't mean like they'll be character alignment good. I mean that they'll be interesting and everything. I have a book over here. When I'm done with this one, and I've started Eclipse, it's called Shiver. If any of you would like to read it, or for me to read it for you, let me know down in the comments. I've had it for years, and a friend of mine from Albertsons used to have it. In fact, she got mad at me for having this one because she thought I stole it from her. Anyway, let's get back to reading, because I'm only on page 4, and it's already 15 minutes in, just about. Kevin, we're supposed to be laying low, Riley said. Riley said, Kevin mimicked in a harsh soprano. Get a spine, Diego. Riley's not here. Kevin sprang over the upside-down Honda and punched out the driver's side window, which had somehow stayed intact up to that point. He fished through the shattered glass and the deflating airbag for the driver. I turned my back and held my breath, trying my hardest to hold on to the ability to think. I couldn't watch Kevin feed. I was too thirsty for that, and I didn't really want to pick a fight with him, so I did not need to be on Rose's hit list. Okay, there we go. The blonde kid didn't have the same issues. He pushed off from the bricks overhead and landed slightly behind me. I heard him and Kevin snarling at each other, and then a wet tearing sound as the woman's screams cut off. Probably them ripping her in half. I mean, I understand that she's trying to write these characters as being overly violent compared to the Cullens, but okay, Victoria has been around longer than most of the Cullens, so she should know about the Volturi and everything. I don't know. Stephanie Meyer isn't. I don't want to say she's bad at this, because that sounds like she's just bad at writing. I mean, she's not good at conflict. She's writing conflict for the sake of having conflict. She's not creating a situation in which conflict arises. Nothing so far tells me that she actually thought about how to get to that scene in Eclipse where the newborns attack. She's just writing so that that happens. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like, retroactive continuity. No, that's when you change something. But I don't like look backs, because you're kind of stuck with whatever you did to get to that point in the first place. Admittedly, with Star Wars, the prequels, at least they did something really different. You know what I mean? Let me know what your thoughts. Let's get back to reading. I tried not to think about it, but I could feel the heat and hear the dripping behind me, and it made my throat burn so bad even though I wasn't breathing. "I'm out of here," I heard Diego mutter. He ducked into a I was gonna say something else. Crevice between the dark buildings, and I followed right on his heels. If I didn't get away from here fast, I'd be squabbling with Raoul's goons over a body that couldn't have had much blood left in it now anyway. And then maybe I'd be the one who didn't come home. Oh, but my throat burned. I clamped my teeth together to keep from screaming in pain. Diego darted through a trash-filled side alley, and then, when he hit the dead end of the wall... Oh, right. I dug my fingers into the crevices between the bricks and hauled myself up after him. On the rooftop, Diego took off, leaping lightly across the other roofs toward the lights shimmering off the sound. I stayed close. I was younger than he was, and therefore stronger. It was a good thing we younger ones were the strongest, or we wouldn't have lived through our first week in Riley's house. I could have passed him easily, but I wanted to see where he was going, and I didn't want to have him behind me. Diego didn't stop for miles. We were almost to the industrial docks. I could hear him muttering under his breath. Idiots, like Riley wouldn't give us instructions for a good reason. Self-preservation, for example. Is an ounce of common sense so much to ask for? "Hey," I called, "are we going to hunt anytime soon? My throat's on fire here." Diego landed on the edge of a wide factory roof and spun around. I jumped back a few yards on my guard, but he didn't make an aggressive move toward me. "Yeah," he said, "I just wanted some distance between me and the lunatics." He smiled, all friendly, and I stared at him. This Diego guy wasn't like the others. He was kind of calm, I guess was the word. Normal. Not normal now, but normal before. His eyes were a darker red than mine. He must have been around for a while, like I'd heard. From the street below came the sounds of nighttime in a slummier part of Seattle. A few cars, music with heavy bass. I don't like those. A couple of people walking with nervous, fast steps, some drunk bum singing off-key in the distance. "You're Bree, right?" Diego asked one of the newbies. I didn't like that newbie. Whatever. "Yeah, I'm Bree, but I didn't come in with the last group. I'm almost 3 months old." "Pretty slick for a 3-monther, he said. "Not many would have been able to leave the scene of the accident like that." He said like it was a compliment. Like he was really impressed. I didn't want to mix it up with Raoul's freaks. He nodded. "Amen, sister. Their kind ain't nothing but bad news." Weird. Diego was weird. How he sounded like a person having a regular old conversation. I just noticed that my face is covered. And no, I'm not like picking my nose or anything. Anyway. No hostility, no suspicion. Like, he wasn't thinking about how easy or hard it might be to kill me right now. He was just talking to me. How long have you been with Riley? I asked curiously. Going on 11 months now. Wow, that's older than Raul. I need to blow my nose. What have I done? I messed up my hair. Oh, that reminds me. If any of you are fans of superheroes, like I am, you'll notice I was wearing a Flash t-shirt in the last video that I uploaded. It should have been the last video. Anyway, go watch the show on the CW called The Flash. In it, there's a character named Cisco Ramon. My mom says he looks just like me, only cute. Also, I'm growing out my hair and it kind of curls the same way that his does. It's just mine's a lot more wavy and his is straight. Anyway, that's not important. Just let me know what you think. I've mentioned that before, I think, on the channel for some videos, but I don't remember which. Diego rolled his eyes and spit venom over the edge of the building. The funny thing is, she calls it venom, so it actually makes sense to say that. Yeah, I remember when Riley brought that trash in. Things just kept getting worse after that. I was quiet for a moment, wondering if he thought everyone younger than himself was trash. Not that I cared. I didn't really care. I didn't care what anybody thought anymore. I didn't have to. Like Riley said, I was a god now. Stronger, faster, better. Harder, better, faster, stronger. Was that the name of that song? I know what to put on my iPod when I'm done here. Yay. If you guys have any songs that you think I would like to listen to, let me know down in the comments and I'll give them a listen. And if I do like them, I'll put them on my iPod. And then we'll do a video where everybody's the winner. Let's see. Nobody else counted. Then Diego whistled low under his breath. There we go. Just takes a little brains and patience. He pointed down across the street, half hidden around the edge of a purple-black alley. A man was cussing at a woman and slapping her while another woman watched silently. From their clothes, I could guess that it was a pimp and two of his employees. This was what Riley had told us to do. Hunt the dregs. Take the humans that no one was going to miss, the ones who weren't headed home to a waiting family, the ones who wouldn't be reported missing. It was the same way he chose us, meals and gods, both coming from the dregs. Unlike some of the others, I still did what Riley told me to. Not because I liked him, that feeling was long gone. It was because what he told us sounded right. How did it make sense to call attention to the fact that a bunch of new vampires were claiming Seattle as their hunting ground? How was that going to help us? I didn't even believe in vampires before I was one. So if the rest of the world didn't believe in vampires, then the rest of the vampires must be hunting smart the way Riley said to do it. They probably had a good reason. And like Diego said, hunting smart just took a little brains and patience. Of course, we all slipped up a lot, and Riley would read the papers and groan and yell at us and break stuff like Raul's favorite video game system. Then Raul would get mad and take somebody else apart and burn him up. Yikes. Then Riley would be ticked off and he'd do another search to confiscate all the lighters and matches. A few rounds of this, and then Riley would bring home another handful of vampirized dregs kids? I don't know. I don't understand. It doesn't sound right to have S at the end of it. To replace the ones he'd lost. It was an endless cycle. Diego inhaled through his nose, a big long pull, and I watched his body change. He crouched on the roof, one hand gripping the edge. All that strange friendliness disappeared, and he was a hunter. That was something I recognized, something I was comfortable with because I understood it. I turned off my brain. It was time to hunt. I took a deep breath, drawing in the scent of the blood inside the humans below. They weren't the only humans around, but they were the closest. Who you were going to hunt was the kind of decision you had to make before you scented your prey. It was too late now to choose anything. Diego dropped from the roof edge, out of sight. The sound of his landing was too low to catch the attention of the crying prostitute, the zoned-out prostitute, or the angry pimp. Huh. A low growl ripped from between my teeth. Mine. This blood was mine. The fire in my throat flared, and I couldn't think of anything else. I flipped myself off the roof, spinning across the street so that I landed right next to the crying blonde. I could feel Diego close behind me, so I growled a warning at him while I caught the surprised girl by the hair. I yanked her to the alley wall, putting my back against it, defensive just in case. Then I forgot all about Diego, because I could feel the heat under her skin, hear the sound of her pulse thudding close to the surface. She opened her mouth to scream, but my teeth crushed her windpipe before a sound could come out. There was just the gurgle of air and blood in her lungs, and the low moans I could not control. The blood was warm and sweet. It quenched the fire in my throat, calmed the nagging, itching emptiness in my stomach. I sucked and gulped, only vaguely aware of anything else. I heard the same noise from Diego. He had the man. The other woman was unconscious on the ground. Neither had made any noise. Diego was good. Hey. The problem with humans was that they just never had enough blood in them. It seemed like only seconds later the girl ran dry. I rattled her limp body in frustration. Already my throat was beginning to burn again. I threw the spent body to the ground and crouched against the wall, wondering if I could grab the unconscious girl and make off with her before Diego could catch up to me. Diego was already finished with the man. He looked at me with an expression that I could only describe as sympathetic. But I could have been dead wrong. I couldn't remember anyone ever giving me sympathy before, so I wasn't positive what it looked like. Go for it, he told me, nodding to the limp girl on the ground. Are you kidding me? No, I'm good for now. We've got time to hunt some more tonight. Watching him carefully for some kind of a trick, I darted forward and snagged the girl. Diego made no move to stop me. He turned away slightly and looked up at the black sky. I sank my teeth into her neck, keeping my eyes on him. This one was even better than the last. Her blood was entirely clean. The blonde girl's blood had the bitter aftertaste that came with drugs. I was so used to that I barely noticed. It was rare for me to get really clean blood because I followed the dregs rule. My ear itches. Why? Diego seemed to follow the rules too. He must have smelled what he was giving up. Why had he done it? Then the second body was empty. My throat felt better. There was a lot of blood in my system. I probably wouldn't really burn for a few days. Diego was still waiting, whistling quietly through his teeth when I let the body fall to the ground. I was gonna make a song reference. I don't know the name of the band, but if you happen to know what I was thinking of, let me know down in the comments. With a thud, he turned back to me and smiled. Thanks, I said. He nodded. You looked like you needed it more than me. I remember how hard it is in the beginning. Does it get easier? He shrugged. In some ways. We looked at each other for a second. I'd just like to point out, in the last however many pages it's been, they've had more character development as possible romantic partners than the entirety of Twilight. But that's just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt, however you will. Where was I? He shrugged. In some ways. We looked at each other for a second. There we go, I remember. Why don't we dump these bodies in the Sound? He suggested. What? I bent down, grabbed the dead blonde, and slung her limp body over my shoulder. I was about to get the other one, but Diego was there before me, the pimp already on his back. I got it, he said. I followed him up the alley wall, and then we swung across the girders under the freeway. The lights from the cars below didn't touch us. I thought how stupid people were, how oblivious, and I was glad I wasn't one of the clueless. You know, getting a look from Bree's point of view, I don't really like her. She's too much like Rosalie, I suppose? I don't know. It's hard to describe. Let me know if you can discern what I'm trying to say. Hidden in the darkness, we made our way to an empty dock, closed for the night. Diego didn't hesitate at the end of the concrete. He just jumped right over the edge with his bulky burden and disappeared into the water. I slid in after him. He swam as sleek and quick as a shark, shooting deeper and farther out into the black sound. I don't understand. He stopped suddenly when he found what he was looking for, a huge slime-covered boulder on the ocean floor. Oh, okay. Sea stars and garbage clinging to its sides. We had to be more than 100 feet deep. To a human, it would have seemed pitch black here. Diego let go of the bodies. Ugh, oh my goodness. They swayed slowly in the current beside him while he shoved his hand into the mucky sand at the base of the rock. After a second, he found a hold and ripped the boulder up from its resting spot. The weight of it drove him waist-deep into the dark sea floor. He looked up and nodded to me. I swam down to him, hooking his bodies with one hand on my way. I shoved the blonde into the black hole under the rock, then pushed the second girl and the pimp in after her. I kicked them lightly just to make sure they were in, and then got out of the way. Diego let the boulder fall. It wobbled a little, adjusting to the newly uneven foundation. He kicked his way out of the muck, swam to the top of the boulder, and then pushed it down, grinding the obstructions flat underneath. He swam back a few yards to view his work. Perfect, I mouthed. These 3 bodies would never resurface. Riley would never hear a story about them on the news. He grinned and held up his hand. It took me a minute to understand that he was looking for a high five. Hesitantly, I swam forward, tapped my palm to his, then kicked away, putting some distance between us. Diego got a weird expression on his face, and then he shot to the surface like a bullet. I darted up after him, confused. When I broke through the air, he was almost choking on his laughter. What? He couldn't answer me for a minute. Finally, he blurted out, "Worst high five ever." I sniffed, irritated. Couldn't be sure you weren't going to rip my arm off or something. Diego snorted. I wouldn't do that. Anyone else would, I countered. True that, he agreed, suddenly not as amused. You up for a little more hunting? Do you have to ask? We came out of the water under a bridge and looked right into 2 homeless guys sleeping in ancient, filthy sleeping bags on top of a shared mattress of old newspapers. Neither one of them woke up. Their blood was soured by alcohol, but it was still better than nothing. We buried them in the Sound, too, under a different rock. I don't know what the Sound is, but I'm going to call it the river. If one of you knows, let me know. I don't know. Oh, I should show you guys my lightsabers. I'll keep reading a little bit longer. We came out of the water. No, I read that. Okay, I remember now. Well, I'm good for a few weeks, Diego said. Are they like snakes? Said when they were out of the water again, dripping on the end of another empty dock. I sighed. I guess that's the easier part, right? I'll be burning again in a couple of days, and then Riley will probably send me out with more of Raoul's mutants again. I can come with you if you want. Riley pretty much lets me do what I want. I thought about the offer, suspicious for a second, but Diego really didn't seem like any of the others. I felt different with him, like I didn't need to watch my back so much. I'd like that, I admitted. It felt off to say this, too vulnerable or something, but Diego just said cool and smiled at me. So how come Riley gives you such a long leash? I asked, wondering about the relationship there. The more time I spent with Diego, the less I could picture him being in tight with Riley. Diego was so friendly. Nothing like Riley, but maybe it was an opposites attract thing. Riley knows he can trust me to clean up my messes. Speaking of which, do you mind running a quick errand? I was starting to be entertained by this strange boy, curious about him. I wanted to see what he would do. Sure, I said. He bounded across the dock toward the road that ran along the waterfront. I followed after. I caught the scent of a few humans, but I knew it was too dark and we were too fast for them to see us. He chose to travel across rooftops again. After a few jumps, I recognized both our scents. What? He was... Oh, okay, gotcha. He was retracing our earlier path. And then we were back to that first alley where Kevin and the other guy had gotten stupid with the car. Unbelievable, Diego growled. Kevin and company had just left, it appeared. The 2 other cars were stacked on top of the first, and a handful of bystanders had been added to the body count. The cops weren't here yet, because anyone who might have reported the mayhem was already dead. Help me sort this out, Diego asked. Okay. We dropped down, and Diego quickly threw the cars into a new arrangement so that it sort of looked like they'd hit each other rather than been piled up. by a giant tantrum-throwing baby. I grabbed the two dry, lifeless bodies abandoned on the pavement and stuffed them under the apparent site of impact. Bad accident, I commented. Diego grinned. He took a lighter out of a Ziploc from his pocket and wait a minute. Started igniting the clothes of the victims. I grabbed my own lighter. Riley reissued these when we went hunting. Kevin should have used this and got to work on the upholstery. The bodies dried out and laced with flammable venom blazed up quickly. Get back, Diego warned, and I saw that he had the first car's gas hatch open and the lid screwed off the tank. I jumped up the closest wall, perching a story above to watch. He took a few steps back and lit a match. With perfect aim, he tossed it into the small hole. In the same second, he leaped up beside me. The boom of the explosion shook the whole street. Lights started going on around the corner. Well done, I said. Thanks for your help. Back to Riley's? I frowned. Riley's house was the last place I wanted to spend the rest of my night. I didn't want to see Raoul's stupid face or listen to that constant shrieking and fighting. I didn't want to have to grit my teeth and hide out behind Freaky Fred. Do you guys remember Courage the Cowardly Dog? So that people would leave me alone. And I was out of books. Oh, jeez. We've got some time, Diego said, reading my expression. We don't have to go right away. I could use some reading material, and I could use some new music, he grinned. Let's go shopping. We moved quickly through town, over rooftops again, and then darting through shadowy streets when the buildings got farther apart to a friendlier, neighborhood. It didn't take long to find a strip mall with one of the big chain bookstores. I snapped the lock on the roof access hatch and let us in. The store was empty, the only alarms on the windows and doors. I went straight to the H's while Diego headed to the music section in the back. I'd just finished with Hale. I took the next dozen books in line. That would keep me a couple of days. There we go. I looked around for Diego and found him sitting at one of the cafe tables studying the backs of his new CDs. I paused, then joined him. This felt strange because it was familiar in a haunting, uncomfortable way. I had sat like this before across a table from someone. I'd chatted casually with that person, thinking about things that were not life and death or thirst and blood. That would be a cool title for a vampire novel. I think I will call it that. Hee. But that had been in a different, blurry lifetime. The last time I'd sat at a table with someone, that someone had been Riley. It was hard to remember that night for a lot of reasons. So how come I never notice you around the house? Diego said abruptly. Where do you hide? I laughed and grimaced at the same time. I usually kick it behind wherever Freaky Fred is hanging out. His nose wrinkled. Seriously? How do you stand that? You get used to it. It's not so bad being behind him as it is in front. Anyway, the best hiding place I've found. Nobody gets close to Fred. Diego nodded, still looking kind of grossed out. That's true. It's a way to stay alive. I shrugged. Did you know that Fred is one of Riley's favorites? Diego asked. Really? How? No one could stand Freaky Fred. I was the only one who tried, and that was solely out of self-preservation. Diego leaned toward me conspiratorially. I was already so used to his strange way that I didn't even flinch. I heard him on the phone with her. I shuddered. I know, he said, sounding sympathetic again. Of course, it wasn't weird that we could sympathize with each other when it came to her. This was a few months back. Anyway, Riley was talking about Fred, all excited. From what they were saying, I guess that some vampires can do things more than what normal vampires can do. And that's good. That's something she's looking for. Vampires with skills. He pulled the Z sound out so I could hear how he was spelling it in his head. What kind of skills? All kinds of stuff. It sounds like mind reading and tracking and even seeing the future. Get out. Since you couldn't see where I was pointing, it works better that. Never mind. I'm not kidding. I guess Fred can sort of repel people on purpose. It's all in our heads, though. He makes us repulsed at the thought of being near him. I frowned. How is that a good thing? It keeps him alive, doesn't it? Guess it helps you, or keeps you alive too. I don't know where I read that. Yikes, I didn't realize how long it had been. Okay, let's get to a good stopping point, because again, it's just one long chapter. I nodded. Guess so. Did he say anything about anyone else? I tried to think of anything strange I'd seen or felt, but Fred was one of a kind. The clowns in the alley tonight pretending to be superheroes hadn't been doing anything the rest of us couldn't do. He talked about Raoul, Diego said, the corner of his mouth twisting down. What skill does Raoul have? Super stupidity? Diego snorted. Definitely that, but Riley thinks he's got some kind of magnetism. People are drawn to him. They follow him. Only the mentally challenged. Yeah, Riley mentioned that. Didn't seem to be effective on the... He broke out a decent impression of Riley's voice. Tamer kids. Tame? I inferred that he meant people like us who are able to think occasionally. I didn't like being called tame. It didn't sound like a good thing when you put it that way. Diego's way sounded better. It was like there was a reason Riley needed Raoul to lead. Something's coming, I think. Winter is coming. A weird tingle spasmed along my spine when he said that, and I sat up straighter. Like what? Do you ever think about why Riley is always after us to keep a low profile? I hesitated for half... Oh! Sorry. It just clicked in my head. Where was I? I hesitated for half a second before answering. This wasn't the line of inquiry I would have expected from Riley's right-hand man. Almost like he was questioning what Riley had told us, unless Diego was asking this for Riley, like a spy, finding out what the kids thought of him. But it didn't feel like that. Diego's dark red eyes were open and confiding. And why would Riley care? Maybe the way the others talked about Diego wasn't based on anything real, just gossip. I answered him truthfully. Yeah, actually, I was just thinking that. We aren't the only vampires in the world, Diego said solemnly. Excuse me. I know, Riley says stuff sometimes, but there can't be too many. I mean, we would have noticed before. Diego nodded. That's what I think too, which is why it's pretty weird that she keeps making more of us, don't you think? I frowned. Huh? Because it's not like Riley actually likes us or anything. I paused again, waiting to see if he would contradict me. He didn't. He just waited and nodded slightly in agreement, so I continued. And she hasn't even introduced herself. You're right, I hadn't looked at it that way. Well, I hadn't really thought about it at all, but then what do they want us for? Diego raised one eyebrow. Want to hear what I think? I nodded warily, but my anxiety had nothing to do with him now. Like I said, something is coming. I think she wants protection, and she put Riley in charge of creating the front line. I thought this through, my spine prickling again. Why wouldn't they tell us? Shouldn't we be, like, on the lookout or something? That would make sense, he agreed. We looked at each other in silence for a few long-seeming seconds. I had nothing more, and it didn't look like he did either. Finally, I grimaced and said, I don't know if I buy it, the part about Raoul being good for anything, that is. Diego laughed. Hard to argue that one, he said. Then he glanced out the windows at the dark early morning. Out of time. Better head back before we turn into Crispies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. I sat under my breath as I got to my feet and collected my pile. Diego chuckled. You know what? I think I'll end it here because I'm up to 43 minutes. Admittedly, I would be farther along into the actual story had I not spent so much time with the introduction and going into tangents about writing and whatnot. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you would like me to continue this book. I will get to Eclipse as soon as possible. I almost said possible. Something's wrong with me. Anyway, let me know what you guys are looking forward to, what you're not looking forward to, what you'd like to see, what you wouldn't like to see, and all that other stuff that I usually say, or I guess used to say, back in the day, which was a Wednesday. And until next time, goodbye everybody.